in theory crafting, what matters is not your number from ACT, right?
Yeah.
In theory crafting, what matters is based on your available formulas, what number are you getting in your spreadsheet, right? Because like anybody can go whack at the boss and crit farm for forever, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily make you good,
Hmm.
right? And plenty of people, I know this for a fact, plenty of people parse and hit stuff forever, and they're doing a mathematically incorrect rotation.
Today, I am talking with a balanced summoner mentor and a contributor to Ak Morning, Litzy, also known as Ophelia, also known as Leah. They're an absolute gamer, and I say that with the utmost respect. And I'm super happy to be talking with them today and to be able to get to know them. So I'm gonna bring them over. We're gonna chat it up. We will do a bunch of questions at the start, and then at the end, for anyone who has any questions, we'll open it up to the chat at the end. And so yeah, let's get going. Let's bring Leah over and let's see what's up. How's it going, Leah? How are you? How was your day?
Hi. It was a day.
It was third Monday. That's what it was.
Yes, it felt like that. You know, it's one of those days where you just are like, oh my God, please.
Yeah.
Can't wait for it to be over. So
It was pretty long, I'm guessing.
yeah, it was very long. I'm glad it's mostly over. I'll say that. It's way better to be here than like 10 hours ago.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, hopefully your week gets better, and hopefully we can make your day go a little bit better for the rest of the evenings.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope your day was good.
And it's been about the same, you know. Third Monday,
Yeah,
it happens.
third
but
Monday.
we move on. I made
Hopefully.
a joke. I made a joke to my friend the other day that's probably already been made. I'm just a zoomer, I guess, but it's like it's Delta or Mondayscape Savage v 3.0, but you know.
Hopefully tomorrow's Tuesday, you know?
Oh, no.
Hopefully.
You mean Thursday? I don't want to go back. Oh my gosh, yeah. So, as someone of many names, I could think of 3 off the top. Well, 4 if we have your side name that you may go by on the side. But let's talk about the difference between Litzy and Ophelia and Leah, where they all came from, and then which one you prefer.
I don't know what to make of that on the side comment, but
you know, the one that starts with the M.
Oh God. That's, oh my gosh, Jackal. You know, that spread beyond just Jackal memeing too. It's like other, anyway.
Oh no.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. Well, it's kind of interesting. So in Final Fantasy, my character's name for a long time was Leah, because I played a Lalafell. So they had that like rhyming name scheme, and almost always when I play MMOs, which I have for forever, I'll use random name generators. And so it was the same in Final Fantasy when I first started playing. Is I just hit the random name generator, and that's the name it gave me, and I was like, thumbs up, I'll just use that one.
Nice.
And so that's where like Leah came from. There wasn't any meaning to it. Ophelia came from I eventually changed. This happened actually only like 4 or 5 months ago or something. I changed to Miko, and I did that for a variety of reasons. But the main one was it felt weird RPing as a Lalafell, and my FC was like making me do a lot more RP. So I wanted to change to something that was more fun to do that with them. And so Ophelia came from like trying to keep the same kind of general sound, but being a different name. So that's where that came from. And then
that's good. That's interesting.
Yeah, Litzy is a completely different story.
Oh no.
There also, okay, it's not a bad story. like now that I think about it, I've never really ever told this to anybody.
You don't
And
have
it's
to
not
if you
like,
don't want to, by the way.
no, it's not
Okay.
bad. It's
Okay.
just
Sure.
so whenever I had to name characters in any kind of game or RPG, I would kind of just like randomly hit letters that sort of made sense after each other until they made a kind of a name, sort of. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But right. And I don't know why I remember this, but I distinctly remember I was like 14 or 15 or something, and I was playing Dragon Quest IX on the DS. I don't know why I remember this. And that Litzy was like one of the names of the characters that I used and like created in that game. And for some reason it like stuck, and that's like what I've just randomly used ever since.
Hey,
And
you do what
that's
works.
the story.
I honestly like. I think that's more interesting than most situations because I'm in a similar boat. Like, Tyci was a truncated version of a randomized WoW character name, and I just like cut off the back end. I don't remember what the back end was, but like, I'm kind of like you in the sense of when I name my characters, I'm randomizing until I find something that I think is interesting or sounds like kind of cool, and I can like mix it up or make it seem realistic or whatever I am kind of thinking at the time. So I relate to that a lot. That's kind of funny that you said that.
I'm terrible at naming characters.
Yeah.
So
Hey,
that's
it happens.
I
I think
always
that's
hit
the
the
hardest
random
part of.
generator.
I think it's the hardest part of character creation is naming a character. I was so intimidated when I shouldn't say intimidated. I don't know another word for it, but when I started playing Final and I was like, oh god, I have to think of a last name too. And
yeah, the last name question was like, wait, it's required? coming from
Yeah.
from WoW, right?
Yeah, I was like, oh my god. Yeah, so let's talk about WoW. Have you played WoW? What's your MMO experience from kind of start to where you are now?
Oh my gosh, my like pedigree here. I started WoW in, I think it was 2005.
Same
It
here.
wasn't
Nice.
it wasn't launch year, but I think it was the year after.
Mhm.
And my memory's a little fuzzy because I was like 8 years old or something. 7 or 8. And I played it with my dad at the time. He was super into it and let me play it with him as a kid, which my mom was not a huge fan of.
Yeah.
But we did it anyway. And I started in vanilla and WoW then, and I've kind of been playing them ever since. I played WoW up until I think like Wrath was when I played the most. I was a teenager, like early teens, and then Cataclysm came out and they ruined the class I played, and my interest dropped a lot.
What class did you play?
Because I played a hunter, and
Okay,
I
yeah.
still to this day I hate focus. So
It was a bridge, that's for sure. I was not expecting that change when Kata came, because I was playing a hunter at the same time, and I was just like, okay, this is weird.
yeah, I didn't like focus, and I never played a hunter again after Kata. And I played after Wrath. I played like off and on through every expansion. There's never been a single expansion I didn't go back and play. But the recent ones, like BFA and Shadowlands, were like,
Yeah, they were pretty rough.
Yeah, the leveling experience is fun, but so the last good one was Legion, and
I agree. I loved Legion. It was, I don't know, maybe it was just like the way it was put together, or just, you know, like a breath of fresh air coming off of WoD, but I loved Legion. But so what made you, I guess, come to Final? When did you start playing Final? Were you playing WoW and Final simultaneously? How did that kind of play out?
yeah, this is interesting. I started playing 14. I started playing Final Fantasy 14 in, I don't remember exactly when, but I think it was patch 2.2. So back in the Realm Reborn. And funnily enough, I literally do not remember what was happening in WoW at the time. I do know I had been playing a lot less of it. I think it was like around the MOP or WAD era, if I had to guess, but I don't remember exactly. And my best friend at the time, and still my best friend to this day, she started playing it before me. And so she told me basically that like she really liked it and wanted me to try it with her. And I said, okay. And I was like, sure. And so I downloaded the trial at the time because the trial still existed. It was up to like level 30 at the time or something like that. And played through Limsa as an arcanist because I wanted to be a scholar because I thought pets were really. I thought like the concept of like a pet healer was really cool.
Yeah.
If only I knew. I mean, back then it was actually like so unique, right? Like
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything like it, and the
Well,
aesthetic was really cool.
Especially if you were like playing Hunter and Wild too, you like
Yeah,
having the pet there is
exactly.
like a part of their staple, especially at the time. So
And I just thought I don't know. I thought the nerd like fairy aesthetic was cool, but I'm
sure.
also a nerd, so. But I got through like the first like half of Limsa and she and I were just like I remember what like impressed me the most coming from WoW, especially back then. This was like 2013 or 14, was literally just sitting on a bench in Limsa spamming emotes at each other.
Yeah.
Because the emotes in the game, like I take them for granted now, but back then we were like crazy impressed by how detailed everything was. And all of these like animations and these like facial expressions and coming from WoW where there's literally none of that. It was like I think that was the moment where like I was kind of sold on the game. It was like I was like level 6 sitting on a bench in Limsa. And I've never stopped playing since.
Yeah. Man, I feel like I relate so much to that because that was one of the first things I noticed too. My friends, I had a real life friend trying to like get me to play over and over and over, and he just kept nagging me, and I was like, I don't want to play it. Like I'm playing WoW. Like, come on, try it. I was like, and one day I just was like, I'm bored of BFA. This is it. Like this expansion is trash. Trying Final Fantasy. I got on. I went to Limsa. First thing I did was pull up the emote list and like go through them because I was standing there and my friend like changed pose in front of me, like just standing pose. And I was like, wait, what are you doing? Like, oh, you can swap through your poses. And I was like, are you serious?
Yeah. Oh my god, I had the same interaction.
That it's little things like that that are so interesting about this game, and it makes it so unique, and I guess it really allows you to express yourself and your character in the game in ways that you would just kind of overlook or just not even think to even add to a game in general,
I mean, I remember the one that impressed me the most of the time was because I played a Lalafell, so the sitting down Lalafell doze animation where they like do this sway thing and then they like actually fall over on the ground and like freak out.
Yeah.
And there's like so much animation expression in it. I remember just spamming that one over and over and talking to my best friend in a voice call at the time, and I was just like, there's no way, right? Because all the MMOs I'd ever played up to that point had nothing really like that. And nowadays there's more advanced stuff here and there and hyper realistic stuff, but nothing has really had the same charm for me ever since. So I don't know, maybe I'm just biased.
No, I feel that. I think it's also being in WoW purgatory for my whole life, where I type an emote and it just says it in the chat unless it's like /wave or something. Being able to like see your character actually like express themselves, it gives you like a lot of closure to your character, and I don't know, it lets you kind of be you, which I think is a really cool thing. So
It was awesome.
You played Scholar. When did you start kind of transitioning away from that, and what are you currently playing nowadays?
Yeah, I started as a scholar in Realm Reborn. I played that up until Heaven's Ward. And I didn't really play any endgame content at all. I just kind of casually played for fun. Um, got to Heaven's Ward, and Astrologian came out. And so that was what I played throughout my time playing Heaven's Ward. I played a little bit of Summoner at the time in Heaven's Ward because, the package deal.
Mm-hmm.
I remember very distinctly being annoyed at playing both of them because back then you had to reset your attribute points every time you wanted to swap between the jobs, which was stupid. And I still have a bunch of that. Yeah,
How does that work? I've never even heard of that.
So back then when you leveled up, it was like in RPG systems when you level up and you allocate your stats.
Like yeah.
So when you leveled up, you got like a point or like 2 points to put into either one of the 6 main attributes. So like strength, dex,
okay,
and mind, right? Whatever. And that was stored with your class. Not with your job, it was stored with your class. So for every other job that was fine, you just put it onto your best main stat, thumbs up, go on with it. But for Arcanist, Scholar didn't want intelligence, and Summoner didn't want mind. So if you wanted to play both, you had to use an item to reset the... Yeah. So it was really obnoxious.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember being frustrated by that. But anyway, in Heaven's Ward, I mostly played Astrologian. I was really mostly a healer player and not really a DPS player. I played a little bit of Ninja. I played a little bit of Summoner, but it was mostly Scholar and Astro. And I took a long break from the game after like 3.1 or 3.2, and then came back in Stormblood. And in Stormblood, I still mostly played healers, White Mage and Scholar mostly, a little bit of Summoner. And it wasn't really until Shadowbringers came out that I kind of shifted more to be a Summoner player. And the reason was actually that when I started Savage raiding more, I did summon Stormblood, but like I actually really got into it in Shadowbringers. I started healing, and then when Verse came along, I joined a group, and they didn't need a healer; they needed a caster. And so that was when I transitioned to playing Summoner more. And then they pulled a practical joke on me because it turns out then they needed a melee, so I played Dragoon for that tier. But I ended up playing Summoner anyway. So it was really mostly in Verse onwards that I started like dedicating to that job.
The Summoner specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's the interesting route. I had no idea that you had healed in the past. That's pretty...
Yeah, it was all I played for a long time, actually.
Wow.
So
Did
yeah, I started
Go ahead.
Scholar and never... Yeah, I just started with Scholar, and then I just loved Astro's aesthetic, and I still do.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. Did you play any White Mage at all, or was it just kind of mainly those two?
I played a lot of White Mage in Stormblood and in early Shadowbringers.
Okay.
I really disliked the Scholar changes, and I haven't really touched it since Stormblood. Really since Heaven's Ward. I played it a little bit in Stormblood, but they changed a lot of Scholar in Stormblood, and it hasn't felt the same ever since, and I haven't enjoyed the job. And Astro, it's changed a lot, and it's not that it's not fun, it's just different, and it's not like what I originally learned and liked. And even though I'm glad balance fishing is gone, it just doesn't really feel the same. I still played it like at a high end in Verse, but it didn't grab my attention the way it did back in Heaven's Ward.
Yeah, I don't really heal much in Final. I leveled the healers, and that's about the extent of my healer experience. But I think one of the main issues I have is mainly just like the interface. I'm kind of spoiled by, quick mouse over, or like having an
Oh
add-on
my
that can
God.
like I can like right click to like do an ability, or left click to do an, stuff like that.
Oh, I remember playing my Resto Druid and WoW and having
Yeah.
grid and all these hotkeys and
Yeah, so same thing, right? And I think when I came over, um, I tried it, and it was kind of that in lieu of not being able to make my raid frames, different sizes, shapes, orientations, etc. But I will say that if I were to play healer, Astro would 100% be my go-to. Like you said, I love the aesthetic. I love the idea of being this kind of niche role where you're constantly throwing out buffs to different people. You're kind of like a support in a way. And I think that's really, really cool idea. Real class fantasy. That's the word I'm looking for.
yeah, it is super cool. And just this fortune teller, stargazer. Back when it was kind of time magey too, it was really cool. Like time dilation was such a cool spell, and that's all kind of gone now. But it was part of the original aesthetic of the job, and it was super neat. So
Well, we move on and adapt. I guess that's all we can really do.
yeah,
So,
nowadays I just spam glare,
oh yeah.
chill out.
So let's talk about Summoner again, and bring it back to you being a balance mentor. You're a mentor in the balance for Summoner, and you're a contributor to Ak Morning. For those that aren't aware of Ak Morning, could you give us a bit more information about that? I'm assuming most people know what the balance is, but maybe you can just throw in a quick insert about that as well. But what are they? How do they play together? What are the difference between the two? And what's your role in them?
Yeah, so the balance is primarily a Discord community, where the goal of the community is basically to provide resources and guides and stuff like that about how to play the game, right? So most people know of the balance because it's the go-to place for, you know, best in slot lists, guides on how to play a job, right? Stuff like that. And so the people who run it and the mentors kind of create that information, present it to people, right? Yada yada. It's there to help people learn. Ak Morning is a little bit different. And historically, it's been very caster focused. And from the name,
Yeah.
kind of summoner focused.
Sure.
And it's kind of branching out a little bit over time, but it's a much more, I would say, kind of nitty gritty like area, at least in terms of presentation. Anyone who's ever gone to the Ak Morning site and read the summoner guides probably knows what I'm talking about. They are a little bit dense at times, but it's basically just Ak Morning is kind of more of a website, and they do have a Discord community too, but it's mostly the website that has these resources and things. It branches out to more stuff. I know Nemec, the owner, does stuff like interviews with people in the community and dev team and hosts them on his website. So it's a little bit more varied content. And then Balance is really just more focused on like information, right? They're both theory crafting involved, but kind of different approaches. As far as how they play into each other, they're not associated, strictly speaking, right? Like they are different. They don't really quote unquote work together. But on the summoner side, at least, which is what I'm involved with, we pretty much do all our work with Ak Morning and then kind of split it between the two, where we, if you look at the balance resources for summoner, they're all like, here's our Ak Morning stuff, because that's where we do it all, right? And then we kind of host it on the balance as well. So that's kind of the interplay between the two, and that relationship doesn't really exist exactly for any of the other jobs, at least not to the extent it does for a summoner. So, you know, it's kind of like a quick snapshot.
Sure. And I guess it's kind of just like another tool, you know, for summoner players, or it sounds like casters as well, to use and learn from.
Yeah, if you want to learn summoner, I mean, you eventually find your way to Auk Morning, whether you like it or not. For most people, it's where basically all of the theory crafting for the job happens. So if you you know, and that's kind of what happened with me, was I you know, sort of became a mentor, and in the process of becoming a mentor was like sort of dragged into Auk Morning as well, because that's where all the summoner stuff is. And right, so it was kind of like a like happened at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, so how did that go down with being a mentor in the balance? Were you approached? Were you know, did you like apply? How does that exactly work?
Yeah, the process is pretty simple, actually. I just started talking in the channels, and I sort of just made it a habit to start answering questions and asking questions and learning about stuff. I was really trying to get better at the game at the time. This was back in like late Eden's Gate, early Eden's Verse. And I hung out around there a lot, right? I was really trying to get better. That was the tier that I improved a lot as a player and kind of became quote unquote good at the game. And in doing that, the mentor, Fright was the main mentor at the time, and he still is, kind of approached me and said like, hey, I noticed you've been around a lot. Do you want to be marked as a helpful person? And so that's kind of like the first step, is they make your name a darker purple, and they say this person seems to know what they're talking about, and they give you the thumbs up, and then everybody in the chat respects you a little bit more, and it goes from there.
Sure.
And then you know, and as time went on, it was just like eventually he asked me, and you know, and asked a similar question, which is just like, okay, do you want to be a mentor? And it was no application process or anything. It was just, we notice you've been helping a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and that, now that I am a mentor, I can kind of tell you, depends entirely on the job and the mentors, and the team of mentors basically get to talk about who they might want to work with, right? Because you work with them. You're kind of like
absolutely.
a team. And so there's not like a formal application. It's really just like a mentors noticing who they might want to induct, and then there's kind of a vote on staff, a discussion, and then either a yes, no.
That's interesting. I actually wasn't aware of kind of how that would go down, but it's cool that you were able to kind of work your way into that by just doing something that you wanted to do in the first place, you know? It's always nice to have something cool like that happen from just a passion you have.
Yeah, I didn't really expect it.
Mm-hmm.
I just started helping out because I was being helped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I just started doing it kind of as a way to sort of give back, because I had learned a lot and was trying to help other people learn.
Well, and like you said, you were trying to learn as well, and you know, in my opinion, the best way to learn is to teach. So
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I learned so much just from answering questions over and over again. Like, because you know, at the start you are still learning stuff and you don't know everything, and over time you start to realize, like, even the, I don't want to say dumb questions, but like even the like simple questions, there's still a lot to piece apart and understand.
Right.
You know, my favorite question I've ever answered was some guy who was like level 18 and came in and asked about like an optimal rotation for level 18. And you know, and we were, of course, we looked at him like,
yeah,
dude, you're level 18, just hit ruin, right?
Yeah.
And and he was like, no, I really want to know. Like, I have these two pets now. They have these different abilities, right? With like autos. And I know that like this Titan one doesn't do damage, right? And he was like really into it. And my favorite question I've ever answered, kind of on a tangent, was
That's
that
fine.
one. And that was one where it was like, seems so simple. He's like, I'm level 18. What buttons do I press, right? But you like dive into it and you start to like piece together these things. And I went to a target dummy and I started testing like auto attack timings with these swaps per hit, right? And like, you know, it's like the simple stuff like that. Like you I guess it just, you learn a lot by looking at answering
Yeah,
those things.
that's actually so funny. What abilities do
Yeah.
you even have at level 18 as a summoner?
So the discussion was, so you have your two pets, like an emerald carbuncle and a topaz carbuncle.
Sure.
You have your first like pet command ability. So for Garuda, that's like an attack of like, I don't know, like 100 and something AoE potency or whatever. And in Titan, it's a shield. Um, so the shield doesn't do damage, right?
Right.
Garuda auto attacks do AoE damage, and Titans don't. So if you're in a single target situation, you always want Titan out because its auto attacks do more, even though its ability doesn't do any damage, right? And so this guy was asking like, well, can I like swap these pets without losing autos to, right? It's like a 2 potency gain or something. It doesn't even matter, right? But you know, he was, so that
That's
was what the discussion was
amazing.
about. But you basically have those abilities and then like
Oh.
dots and ruin, and that's like all you have. Oh, and energy drain and fester, but it's like 6 or 7 buttons.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I guess we talked about your favorite question. What's like the most common question that you get in the balance?
Recently it's been, is summoner dead or is it saved? Because of Endwalker.
Thoughts? I'm interested.
Oh my god. So depending on the time of day you enter Summoner Lounge, it's either Copium or Doomium.
Okay.
50-50 coin flip for which one. Especially like when, oh my gosh, especially when the Media Tour NDA lift. Oh my lord. But I think it is overall positive.
Okay.
There's a couple things I really don't like and a couple things I'm hesitant about, but the art direction is phenomenal. And the thematic design is incredible. I don't think anybody's ever going to dispute that.
Totally agree.
And
Yeah.
the rotational structure is sick, right? Like the idea of like having these primal phases and demi phases and how they interact is awesome on paper. So it's cool, but I'm gonna kind of steal a comment that Mugi made. Mugi is one of the summoner peeps that hangs around, and he's also on Crystal. I don't know if you ever met Mugi actually.
It sounded
But
familiar when you said it. I just wasn't sure I knew them or not. Anyways.
yeah, so one of the comments that Mugi made was, it's like they built a foundation and called it a house.
Okay.
And I think that kind of sums up my thoughts, is like what they have is so cool, and then you delve into it and there's not actually that much there.
Okay.
Right? Like it's pretty scripted overall. It's not as bad as like Machinist, right? But it's pretty scripted. There's not really that much variation in what you choose to do. There's a little bit of flexibility with like what primals you use, but you just use them all and hit all the buttons. There's not really any off globals at all. Energy drains like a 60-second cooldown, and you hit 2 festers a minute. Right? And so there's like a few weird things in there that are just like,
Yeah.
right? But like the actual foundation of the job is just like so cool. So, you know, my hope is that they add a couple things to make it a little more interesting in terms of actually playing it. Because what I'm worried about is it's going to be like, you know, machinist or whatever, where you have like this same sequence of buttons you just press every time, and it's boring, right?
Sure.
Because there's not really, it's not like technically difficult, you know?
So is there not a lot of room to move things around? Is it, I guess a good example is like Dragoon, in the sense of it kind of plays itself. Like you can shift your I forget what your eye phases, I forget what they're called. You can kind of shift
Yeah.
those around, but like other than that, you're kind of rigid.
Yeah, I mean, your choices are basically what order do you use your 3 primals in, right? Garuda, Ifrit, Titan.
Okay.
But you're always going to use all 3 of them because like otherwise you're just not casting. They do more damage than your filler, and you have time to use them all before your demis come up. So you're always using them. And so your only choice is like, what order do I use them? But the problem is that like they're like all instant. Except Ifrit, I guess, right? And so outside of like aligning with your team's buffs, there's not really any reason to choose one or the other, right?
Yeah,
There's
that
like
makes
nothing,
sense.
there's very few things in this game where you're not allowed to stand still and cast, right? So it doesn't, like, even though there is choice, it's not choice that really matters. You just hit them and use your abilities and hope the boss dies, right? So
Yeah, that's interesting. Cause like I don't play summoner. I guess you could say I'm sort of a summoner main myself. If you ask Jackal about how well I did on summoner, that's an embarrassment that I wish would never be seen again. But no, I was looking through after the embargo lift, I was looking through like those sheets that were made of all the tooltips and stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, like as someone that doesn't play summoner, looking at that sheet was very overwhelming because it's like reading a light novel. The tooltips are huge, and like it was just like intimidating at the glance, and then like starting to read it, it was like, okay, this isn't as bad as I was making out to be, but I still didn't really understand how it was gonna interact and work. So your explanation was pretty interesting
yeah,
to
I
hear.
mean, the nice thing is like, yeah, even though there's a lot of text and it seems confusing, like if you watch like 1 minute of it being played, it instantly makes sense. Like it's very obvious, right?
Yeah.
You hit your demi button, you do that, you hit your primal buttons, you hit their abilities that you have, and then you hit your demi again. And even though there's like there's just an insane amount of skills in the spellbook,
Yeah.
they're all consolidated in the same buttons that just change, right? Like I'm trying to think of what buttons do that in the game. Like you
The
know how like you hit
PvP
standard.
buttons are what I think of first.
Yeah, like the PvP button, like rotations, like auto rotations.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that kind of, right, where like the buttons just adjust, right? You have like one button that does your primal ability for single target, and one that does it for AoE. And you hit the same button in Ifrit, Garuda, and Titan, and they
Like
do different
continuation.
things, but it's like continuation. Like you know how in Gnashing Fang you just hit like Gnashing Fang continuation, whatever the second one is continuation, whatever the third one is continuation, right? And continuation changes into those buttons. It's kind of like that. Like you just hit the same button over and over again. So if you look at the hotbar, right, there's like nothing there, right? You have like 10 buttons on your hotbar, right? So you're casting a lot of different skills, but it's not actually many buttons.
Right.
So it's yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that makes sense. It's definitely overwhelming just to look at, I guess, on paper. So I think like, after seeing people play it after the embargo lifted and looking through the abilities a bit more, I totally see what you're saying, because there were a lot of times I was like, well, where's all this stuff at? Seems a bit empty, but I guess we'll just have to see how it plays. Maybe it does end up feeling really good, and maybe like the mechanics that they've planned out for the different fights really pairs well with the different abilities that they got.
I'm
Or go ahead.
hoping. I'm hoping
You're
so.
hoping, yeah, copium. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, well, there is a lot of copium, but there is actually a lot of interesting optimization with the job, like specifically with fights that have downtime.
Okay.
So like, think like E11S from this tier, right? And the reason why, I don't actually know if you know this, but so in Shadowbringers, we have like trances, right? Like Dreadrune Trance, Firebird
Right.
Trance, and those are like our demis, and those have a 55-second cooldown. So you can choose to just use them on CD, or you can delay them a little bit for buffs if you want to. In Endwalker, they have a fixed cooldown of 60 seconds, and they're on the GCD, and they're affected by spell speed.
So the cooldown gets reduced by spell speed?
Right. And so what that means is it changes like how quickly you go through your entire rotation loop.
Okay, that's interesting.
So you know how like Black Mage can play like Speed Mage, right? And go through like their fire phases like real fast? It's like that, except instead of your fire phase taking, like 15 seconds, it's your whole rotation loop taking a minute, right? So because the job is really GCD based, having spell speed means that you can work around downtime to like fit in an extra demi phase before the downtime happens, or get this extra primal phase off before, right, or so on and so forth. And so we were spreadsheeting that, which is very fun, and looking at like fights from this expansion and how we would chart them out, and it's good, which means the problem is that it varies based on how much downtime you have. So you don't want more spell speed than you need because it's wasted, right?
Right.
Which means you need to customize your gear set with how much spell speed you have.
Oh boy.
To where you want to end your rotation loop with downtime. And like where you want to pick it back up after, right? So it's not like Black Mage where you just like Speed Mage Fire 4, just, so it's very complicated if you actually want to optimize it in that context.
Sure.
And if you just want to play casually, just hit your buttons.
I kind of like the ideology, at least. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I like the ideology of that. And
Yeah.
they're on a 1 minute loop now? Weren't they on a 2 minute in Shadowbringers? Or am I wrong?
I mean, it's 1 minute, 2 minute. I mean, the 2 minute loop is just because Bahamut. So your trance has like a 1 minute cooldown, but when you hit Bahamut and then Bahamut goes away, it turns into Phoenix.
Right.
And when you hit Phoenix, it goes away and turns into Bahamut, right?
Right.
So it flip flops. And so it's in Endwalker, it's the same thing. So it's technically a 2 minute cycle in Endwalker too. But Bahamut and Phoenix are like the exact same.
Sure.
Except for like one ability, right? So even though it's like technically a 2 minute loop in Endwalker, it's really more like a 1 minute loop with like a slightly different demi every other minute.
Okay. Did they allow the you can like minimize Bahamut? Can you do that with the Phoenix now?
Yeah, you can. In Endwalker you can. So, which is blasphemy, and they should never have added that.
I'm gonna bite my tongue. Dude, when I found out that you could make a Bahamut small, that was the first thing I did. And then I saw the Phoenix come out. I was like, what the hell? I thought I made it tiny, and then it didn't.
It's actually a really common question and complaint is that you can't make it smaller. Personally, I play with them both on large. So
they're like their own mechanic. You have to, make sure you can see around them, see the mechanics around them and stuff,
Look, I'm just saying, nothing is as cool as like going into like the trios of Ukab and just bringing out Bahamut against Bahamut, right?
That is
like,
pretty sweet. I'm not gonna
like, you're not gonna bring out this tiny mini Bahamut against
yeah.
actual Bahamut, right?
That's funny. That I do think that how big Bahamut is super cool. But
it makes it feel more powerful. I don't know.
For sure, yeah. And then he hits like the Ogmorns or whatever, and it's just like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, what would you say is a common misconception you see about Summoner? And then I kind of have a follow-up question about that after you answer the Summoner related one.
That it's hard.
I think.
And let me explain. Let me explain. To play the job at like the absolute perfect optimal level is ridiculous, right? It's like insanely difficult.
Sure.
But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just playing it. And the job has a reputation that it is extremely difficult, and you have to be like a gigabrain, like PhD to understand this 2-minute rotation loop, and you've got to like have this degree in like trance timeline, and it's
got to take online Ogmorning classes.
Like, here's the secret. Half the time you're just hitting Ruin 3. Right? Like, you're just hitting this one spam button, and like every like 30 seconds you hit like a dot button, and like you hit your trance when it comes off cooldown, I guess, and hit these other abilities when you have them off cooldown, but like that's not any different than any other job, right? Like the job has this reputation for being really, really, really hard, but that's just because it has a lot of dumb, janky systems that don't make sense together.
I think it's hard.
Right?
I suck though, so I mean, I guess this. Look, I'll even pull it here. This is why I think it's hard.
Oh boy.
Are you ready to see this monstrosity?
Yes.
Like, don't be jealous, because like I'm not trying to like come for your job or anything, but all I'm saying is that I'm kind of a gamer when it comes to Summoner. So
I can see you're just about to break blue.
I think green's a pretty color. You know, rank. I'm top 15,000. So I'm pretty good at the game.
But you're ranked like top 10,000 on Raw Moon. I mean, it's pretty good, right?
Oh, I told you. I'm just. But no, seriously though, I think it's I think it's actually pretty difficult. But I had also like never played a caster before, and in this game at least, and it was kind of a transition there.
I think the thing about it that people don't understand when they say it's hard is that they misunderstand, or like they have like a assumption that they have to play really well to get good results, right? And so if you think about something like what's a good example? Like ninja kind of, right? Like if you just sit there as a ninja and you just hit your 1, 2, 3 over and over again, and like you never use trick attack, you're messing up your mudras, right? You know, you're like not aligning anything. You're not going to be very effective.
Sure.
The thing with Summoner is like, even if you don't play that well, nothing in the job is that punishing, right?
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
Think about Black Mage, right? If you drop Enochian on Black Mage, you're like healing the boss, right?
Yeah.
If you drop your dots on Summoner, like whatever, right? You lose like 90 potency every 3 seconds. Like not a huge deal, right? You just put him back on. If you have to use an instant cast, you lose 40 potency to use a Ruin 2, right? Like there's a lot of you lose a demi auto attack that's 100 potency, 120, right? Like there's a lot of small things that nickel and dime you, but like every mistake you make isn't really that punishing. So even though you're making a lot of mistakes, and most Summoner players are making a lot of mistakes, you're still like doing fine, right? And like nothing illustrates this more. Like if you go and look at like a high ranking Summoner log, something in like the 95 plus range, go look at like a random 96 log and plug it into XIV analysis, and that thing's gonna scream at you, right? There's like 30 things wrong with whatever this person's doing.
Sure.
They're fucking up this and that, right? and they're still getting a 96, right? Because like it just doesn't matter, right? Like you have 20 ruin 2s, but like whatever. You know, and so like that's kind of what I meant by saying like at the top high end, yeah, it's really complicated because you can't afford any of those mistakes.
Right.
But if you're just trying to like get blues or or greens, like you just hit buttons, right? Like see, yours is a perfect example. You're like, I'm terrible at summoner, but your logs are still like the median, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Even though you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and
So
I think you make a really great point, because when I was trying to learn summoner, I literally was like, I'm just gonna dive in. I'm pulling the best log for Ramu. I'm gonna go into some practice Ramu groups. And I'm just gonna reverse engineer this fight and see where I should line things up based on like what my positions are and like how those abilities line up. And I would mess up, and then I would be like, well, what do I do now? Like I instead of basically learning how the class worked together and played together and learning how to first be flexible with it, I guess, I just tried to head first into it instead of doing what you're saying of like who cares what if you're dropping your dots when you first learn. Like just keep pressing things and like don't worry about messing up and stuff like that. So I like you make a good point.
The worst mistake you can make on summoner is messing up your dot timeline with like try disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And even that mistake, like doing it once loses you maybe 500 potency, 400 maybe, right? It's like a Dragoon forgetting to hit Stardiver.
Samurai forgetting to hit their buff thing for Madari.
Yeah, like forgetting to hit Kaiten on Samurai, right? Like that's the worst mistake you can make. The worst single mistake, right? And now compare that to Samurai losing a Tsubame because they drifted, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's compare that to a Black Mage dropping a Nokian and not being able to go into it for 30 seconds, right? Like so like yeah, there's a lot of mistakes that can add up and be really bad, but like your single mistakes you're making are not really that bad. And so most people when they play, most people aren't making mistakes like every second, right? They're making 1 or 2 every minute, right? Or 3 every minute. And each of those mistakes on summoner is like, you lose a little bit, but like whatever, you just keep going. And on some other jobs, you make those mistakes and you could, it's like the sound of a bomb dropping through the air on the DPS meter, right? Right.
Yeah.
You're below the healers all of a sudden. So, that's kind of my, as far as misconception, I think is definitely that it's hard, and it earns that reputation if you're trying to optimize it. If you're just trying to play it, not really.
Yeah, I think that's a great take, honestly, and I feel like not biting off more than you can chew when you're first learning a job is really good, or when you're even first trying to get an optimization or go kind of a step forward, not going too far past what you're capable of, and being able to recognize that is really important. Taking it one step at a time, that's all it really is. So.
Yep.
So I know that before I had quit, or I shouldn't say quit, but taking a break from Final Fantasy and played WoW for a bit, there was a bit of like misconception I feel about the balance being for like only for new players. What are your thoughts on that, and is it a misconception, or do you think it's more true?
I think that reputation comes so there's actually some history here. I don't know how much of it you know, or how much the audience knows, but
go for it.
Listening.
I'm all ears. Let's go.
So back in Stormblood, when the balance really kind of started taking off, the uh, quote unquote requirements for being a mentor were a lot laxer. And there were a lot of questions, like, levied at the people in charge as to like what their credentials were to be giving this information, right?
Sure.
And so even though there's a discernible difference, a big one, between being good at playing the game and being good at understanding the game, like a huge one, right? Like a lot of people who are really good at the game just copy a log and don't really understand it. And if you show them an Excel spreadsheet, they'd probably cry. Right? And a lot of people that are really good at the math not all of them are actually that good at the game, right? They're very, very different skill sets. Well, that nuance is not very well understood. And so when a mentor who's really good at the math is like parsing blues and purples, right? You can see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
People say
No,
like,
yeah.
why is this blue and purple parser
Sure.
like the person teaching and in charge of this stuff, right?
Yep.
Even though they're not necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
Now, that's not saying they were always right,
Sure.
but back in Stormblood, that was very common. A lot of the jobs had people on staff, either the whole staff or some of the staff, that weren't always the best players. Nowadays, that's really not that true. For every job, there's at least one person, I'm pretty sure, who's at least like at that orange-pink level, which is more than good enough to teach the job.
Yeah.
And anybody who's ever parsed knows that like if you can get a 97, like you can get a 99, right? So with maybe there's a couple people here and there who don't really play that much Savage, or they don't do ultimates that much, and they don't parse, and they don't have like that impressive, quote unquote impressive, like log resume.
Sure.
But for the most part, if you go and look and you just go look up a random mentor, like you're gonna see oranges and pinks, right? You just go to balance and just choose anybody, and most of the time you're gonna see someone who has like those oranges and pinks. You go look, you see like Rin Karagani, right? Or or look at Spence, who I know has like oranges and pinks, or right, Lana, or plenty of people, right? I'm just like looking at the list of mentors. And there are a couple here and there who aren't at that level.
Sure.
They've done a very good job. The balance, I think, has done a very good job of diversifying and having at least one of those people, and that criticism has kind of died down. But what really came out of that criticism is what's lasted, right? Is this idea that, wow, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just talking to noobs. They're not good at optimizing, right? Blue and purple parsers. They don't know what they're talking about, right? And that criticism has dropped from they don't have anybody who knows what they're talking about to they're just talking about it for noobs, right? They don't actually know how to play the game.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, at least based on my experience, it's super not true. Pretty much everybody who's on the mentor staff, at least that I know and talk to, knows a lot about the game and is good at the game. And yes, they know how to optimize. That said, some jobs are better at it than others, right? Not all of them are, at the same level. And then I had a thought I wanted to say and I don't remember what it was. Shoot. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, that's okay. Give you a second to think about it. Or I can I wanted to say that like that's kind of the same thing in WoW. And if you think of it, just feel free to interrupt me. But
yeah, go for it.
It's kind of the same thing in WoW too, where a lot of the theory crafters and people that are writing the guides and or piecing together different openers, rotations, optimizations for specific fights, etc. They play the game, but their passion is and their skill is really in their mind and being able to piece together the information they have and they're equipped with to basically better the community of that job and or class in WoW. And you see it all the time, especially in the like WoW discords of like, well, why would I exactly what you were saying? Why would I listen to this person? They only parse like purple or whatever. And it's like, well, they don't really play that much. Like they know the game very well, but they're not, running parses all the time trying to like parse their way, or they're not in a good guild or whatever the situation is. And I think that there's a very distinct difference between mechanical skill and having the knowledge necessary, and being able to do both is very difficult. And I think that the knowledge portion should not be overlooked at all, and I think that it's a very important thing that people should, I guess, respect is what I'm trying to get at.
I think that a lot of people don't understand the fact that in theory crafting, what matters is not your number from ACT, right?
Yeah.
In theory crafting, what matters is based on your available formulas, what number are you getting in your spreadsheet, right? Because like anybody can go whack at the boss and crit farm for forever, right?
Sure, yeah.
That doesn't necessarily make you good, right? And plenty of people, I know this for a fact, plenty of people parse and hit stuff forever, and they're doing a mathematically incorrect rotation, right?
Freestyle Sams.
Yeah, it's literally just math, right?
Yeah.
Like they're just doing a wrong rotation. I do remember what I was gonna say. I'll say it really quick. Was that part of the criticism that gets levied at the balance is, like you said, that it's for like casuals or for mid-core players, partially because of the resources it provides. And there's a pretty simple reason for that, in that most of the people who look at it are not optimizers and couldn't care less, right? So if you're designing a set of information to disseminate to people, you want to know your audience, right? Your audience is, here's all these green and blue and purple parsers, mostly, kind of middle band, who are trying to raid, right? Or just trying to learn the job, or maybe they're casuals, right? And they don't even do Savage, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And they just want to know like the quick, pick it up, what gear do I use, what food do I use, right? And you want to make the guide kind of simpler for them to understand. And that is the vast majority of the content that's consumed.
Yeah.
Right? So naturally you design your content around that, right? That's like, we're not necessarily being paid for it, but it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what people want. The criticism then comes from, well, we see all this content that's catered towards this player base, right? And then not any of the other optimization content. Well, I'll tell you right now, as the summoner mentor who did not write these guides, but the summoner guides on Awk Morning, mostly penned by Elevation, who's a brilliant guy, are like universally panned, right? Even though they give exactly what those people want, right? They're super in-depth. They give you tons of optimization. They're technically written. There's a lot of jargon you have to understand because the job is complicated at that level, right? And nobody likes them.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true. Tons of people like them, right?
Yeah. But like the majority, the loudest people, I guess you could say.
The loudest group, which are like those mid-core players, right? So there's your answer for why the balance does that, right? It's because they've adapted to the criticism they've gotten over time and said, here's where all these people, this is what they want, and they want that. And then it's not like the theory crafting and high-end stuff is a secret. Like, it's there, you can find it. You have to ask about it because they don't give it to everybody. Because if you just put like an AI Black Mage guide in your resources channel, right? Like you laugh at that, right? Because it's.
I remember like picking up Ninja. Like Ninja was the first job that I played in this game, and I'm a boosted boy. Blame me, whatever. Anyways, but the first thing I did was I went to the balance, I opened up the ninja guide, and I started reading through it, and I said, "Oh my god, this is so much information. How the hell am I supposed to learn all this?" And like you were just saying, that is catered towards the like more common people that would want to read that guide, aka, new people a
Mm-hmm.
job, people who are in the middle range, green, blue, whatever. So like I totally get the aspect that the balance or the precedence or whatever you want to say that the balance is setting with that. But at the same time, like it was very thorough, it was very detailed. It showed, even if I were to look at it now from my perspective of knowing how to play Ninja now, it would pretty much cover every single thing that you would need to know, um, to an extent. Uh, and that
Yeah.
was what,
I
almost
mean,
2 years ago at this point. So
it ties back into the question I answered earlier about like Summoner being hard, right? When the main primary guide available is very dense and hard to understand, communicates this idea that the job is really complicated,
yeah,
even though it's not really, right? But the material that's presented is makes it seem harder than it really is. So yeah.
yeah. I really
And
appreciate what the balance has been doing too with like I've noticed that it's been, more cleaning up the openers and the opener or the resource sections, like making it very apparent like this is, the basic opener, and then here are some other variants that you can do if you want. But this is like the kind of go-to, and I guess I don't want to say spoon feeding, but kind of spoon feeding, and then as you kind of read through the rest of the resources, it starts offering more and more and more and more the more interested you want to get.
yep. And that's like kind of the idea is most jobs try to have that idea. Um, Apollo asked a really good question. I don't know if you saw it.
I did
I
not.
kind of want to
Sure,
segue to
let's
talk
talk
about
about it. Yeah,
it.
go ahead.
So the question is, do you feel like some of the really high level people avoid mentor roles just so they can focus on their own optimization?
Oh, that's a good question.
And the answer is absolutely.
Yeah,
Like 100%. I can name like off the top of my head several people who aren't mentors, totally could be, but they aren't interested because they want to focus on this other stuff they're doing, and yet they still help out by providing and helping those resources. The one that comes to mind immediately for me is I'm probably gonna say his name wrong, Jahadan, who's the guy who created a bunch of stuff, but famously for me at least famously, the samurai spreadsheet planner.
yeah.
He's the main mind behind that, which if you've never used it, good God, that guy is insane, right? That sheet is insane.
That sheet is
and
terrifying. It gives me
and
nightmares.
and so he is not a mentor. I don't know if he's ever been one before, but he's not now. He's still around in the Theorycrafting channels, right? He's around in like the lounges, and in the staff channels because he helps out, but he's not a mentor, right? And so he's one of the first people that comes to mind. Tons of technical knowledge. I don't even know how good at Samurai he is. All I know is that he wrote this sheet and I love him for it. And there's people like that for a lot of the jobs where they don't want to be a mentor. They don't want the responsibility that comes from it. They don't want the obligations that come from it. They just want to make their cool theory crafting stuff and share it.
That's great. Honest,
So
like I think that's amazing, and the fact that people are willing to do that and willing to just help other people, and honestly, biggest thing, share that information to people is. I think that's extremely healthy for the game as a whole, and I think it's extremely healthy for the high-end community, especially with sheets like what's his name, Jaha, or I don't want to mess it up, but like his sheet for Samurai, like you were saying, is absolutely ridiculous and in a good way. It is so detailed and so involved and accounts for every little thing that you can think of, and it's intimidating when you first open it.
Oh man, that thing is a godsend if you're a Samurai player and you
Yeah.
want to optimize. And
Yeah.
I guess also to take on the question in a little bit of a different way, Um, Plenty of people focus on their own optimization and avoid the balance entirely.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's plenty of people who are brilliant. They're really good, and they're either in their own sub communities or just not involved in the balance. Or, one that comes to mind is in Awk Morning, right? Nemec's not a part of the balance. Super smart guy, right? He helps with the summoner stuff all the time. He's another one of the contributors on the team there, right? So there's plenty of people who aren't involved there for whatever reason, right?
Sure.
That they've chosen to not be involved, and focus on that instead.
And I'm sure it's a lot of work too, like being a mentor, and like how do you how do you keep up with all the questions that maybe go flying through the lounge or reasonable questions tabs, and I feel
It
like that
depends.
can
I mean,
be a lot.
most of the time it's actually pretty quiet, except for around like huge release stuff like media tour, which was crazy.
Yeah.
But you're not the only person. It's not like I'm the only person doing it. There's 2 other mentors and like a small army of helpfuls that also do the same thing, right? And they know just as much as I do, really, and help out. And like I think being a mentor, it's not like a job exactly. Like it's not like you have like a quota, right? You have to answer this many questions every day or whatever. People are in and out. Like if you just can't be around a couple days, like nobody asks a question about it, right? And so I would say it's periodically busy when you can volunteer your time, because everybody who does it's just a volunteer, right? Nobody's getting paid for it.
It's all just out of enjoying what you do, pretty much.
Yep.
From what it sounds like. I also don't want to keep you up. Well, I don't know what your schedule is, but I also wanted to talk about some World First stuff.
The spicy topics now.
Since it is coming up. What? I think I saw there's that Twitter that does like the how many days till Endwalker. I think it was at like 22 today or something around there. So we're getting pretty close. It's kind of scary. But Endwalker's coming soon. TPS has already talked about streaming possibly the World First. There's rumors of Echo and maybe even Limit having some kind of little team they put together competing. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not, but I've definitely seen rumors about that. What are your thoughts on, I guess, 1, streaming World Prog, and then 2, really, 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 really good WoW guilds trying their hand in a World First race for Endwalker?
I think more people playing the game is good. I think the people who do World First in WoW are really, really good at World of Warcraft, like obviously, and the skills transfer over to at least some capacity here. And I know there've been like these events where they've been like blind progging Eden raids and doing all that. And that's been actually pretty cool to watch some of it. I think that's good that they're doing that, and I hope it goes well for them. Streaming, I have a controversial opinion on streaming. I think
Go for it.
I think streaming World Prog sucks. And let me explain why. Okay, let me explain why. In World of Warcraft, when you stream World Prog, you give away kind of your strats, right? But a lot of it's pretty execution heavy, right? And you can disagree with me. I haven't rated Mythic, or like her. I mean, the highest I ever rated was Heroic, and that's all there was at the time. But like in WoW, when you do that, you're giving away some strats, sure, but maybe you give away your comp or whatever. But like the barrier is your execution.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
you're
you're 100% right.
You pull like 400 pulls of something, and you knew how it worked like on pull 50, right?
Yeah.
But it's just this execution of understanding it and of actually doing it is really hard. Okay, compare that to Final Fantasy. If you understand how the fight works in Final Fantasy, you're clearing in less than 5 pulls if you're actually good at progging, right? What gates people in Final Fantasy is not execution. There's very few mechanics, especially in Savage, that are actually that hard to execute. And especially for teams that are like this good to be world progging.
Yeah.
Right? So what is the barrier for progression is understanding the mechanics. Right? Take a look at what's a good example? Lions. Dear God, right? In P1
I actually haven't done
this year,
E12,
right?
but the first thing that came to mind to me was Light Rampant. So that was like
Light Rampant's another great example. We
yeah.
can talk about that one, right? Where like Light Rampant is like this and I'm also, by the way, you should do Promise. What the hell are you doing?
I'm halfway through 11 as of yesterday. So I've been progging casually with some WoW refugees. So
you're missing out because E12 is really really good, if very frustrating to do multiple times. Really fun to prog. But Light Rampant, right? You get to Light Rampant and like, holy moly, what the hell's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get there, there's these 4 tethers, these 4 towers, these orbs are going at you. We have these stacks with different numbers. What the hell is going on, right? These,
orbs are shrinking and huge hitboxes. Yeah.
It's just like visual and audio, like auditory overload, right? And it's so much at once. And then you watch a VOD of a group doing Ilya or Ayatori or Sharingan or anything that's not Hook. And you're like, oh, isn't really that bad.
That's how you do it. Yeah.
Right? Now, that's the thing, right? Is what's hard about Final Fantasy is coming up with the strat. So if you're watching a group in World Prog and everyone's streaming and you yoink their strat from them, you just solve the fight. Like that's it, right?
Right.
It's over. It's like snap, snap, done. So if you look at like this tier, you look at like the past couple tiers and you look at like the world first race, the only reason that so many of the groups are so close together is because Ariza Mercury always streams and his group are prog champions and figure everything out and everybody steals their strats from them, right? Like, I'm not joking.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why all those people end up progging so fast. And the ones that get world first, are a little step ahead, right? But all the like top 5 to 25, right, are all just yoinking strats from whoever's streaming. And that's kind of lame. I don't know. Like, that's kind of why I said it sucks, is because like the execution part of Final Fantasy isn't really that interesting most of the time in prog, right? It's very fun to optimize like and execute like greedy, risky strats. But just to do like a prog strat to solve a mechanic, it's not really usually interesting or that difficult. What's fun is getting that overload of like what the hell is going on and trying to figure it out. And when everybody's streaming World Prog, you're just gated by the fastest group. Whoever solves it fastest, you just have your 9th man go yoink it. Everybody does it, move on, right?
Yep, I agree. I think that's also a really good comparison between the two games is execution, because I mean, one of my guilds in WoW when we were progging Mythic Sire, the fight wasn't hard at all. Obviously, we had all the strats because by the time we like a normal mid-core guild hits the end boss, the raid's been done for weeks or months at this point. So we have all the strats. We know what to do. If people watch the video, that we know what to do. But then it just comes down to execution. And since the fights are more sporadic and random, these 2 people out of 20 get this mechanic, this pull, and then another 2 people out of 20 get this mechanic, this pull, and then it's just like It'd be like trying to do, I don't even want to say wormhole because the execution part of wormhole isn't very difficult per se, but like it'd be like
It's like
doing some,
nail.
yes, exactly. It'd be like doing some kind of randomized thing, but having 20 people have to do the same thing. So now you're kind of just waiting on every single person to prog that one mechanic because they have to get it at one point, or you're gonna, get really close to a kill, and then that one person that hasn't gotten that mechanic yet gets it, and now you're dead. So you're just waiting for everyone to prog the fight, and
Yeah, it's like it's like watching I remember watching the recent, I think it's Sanctum was the last
yeah.
raid, and the final boss was Sylvanas, right? And there's
Yep.
like a mechanic in the last phase where people get like these like knife fan mechanics, and they have to like spread out in like a little bubble
Yep.
to create a safe spot for the rest of the group, right? And I remember watching World Prog groups wipe there so many times, right? Because one person got the knives and was in the wrong spot, right? Because they just executed it wrong, right? And for the most part, mechanics like that don't exist in Savage.
Yeah.
Like the amount of like that extent of personal responsibility, for the most part, and there's exceptions here
Sure.
and there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But for the most part, it really doesn't exist. And there's less people to teach because there's only 8. So, and also so much of the game is scripted and into like roles and stuff, right? And it really minimizes like what you have to or don't have to know, and and like you can assign and like mitigate that so much when you're like really good and experienced at progging, and it's just really different. And having strats going into like in a prog situation, right?
Mhm.
What you're being tested on is how quickly can you solve a mechanic and come up with a strat.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's just a Final Fantasy thing that's different from WoW, and streaming ruins it.
It's a fair argument. I totally agree. And I think that's actually one of the cool things about Final is like it feels a lot more involved in the strat making side. Like even if you're late, right, and you're watching a video guide, you can at least appreciate, like I'm talking like you're coming in late to a tier or whatever, like I am right now with Promise, right? You come in late, you see these strategies, you can really, really, really appreciate how people are resolving these mechanics, or you see like an uptime strategy and you can really appreciate how people are doing this because the method of which they're approaching it and the idea that was behind it is so cool to see how it plays out. Because most of the time for like a WoW quote unquote strategy, it's like, okay, we put the group here, we put the tanks here, the melee against this mechanic runs to the left, and then they come back to the group, and that's kind of it. Like that's the whole fight. And then other than that, it's like don't stand in bad. Massacre is a good example on Sire to Nathrius and Castle Nathria. The amount of wipes that we had, the people dying to Massacre was absolutely ridiculous. And I think that's actually another thing that's kind of separates WoW and Final, is like WoW feels a lot more gear checky than it actually does DPS check, if that makes sense. Like I remember doing E8S.
Totally.
I remember doing E8S. By the time I hit E8S, I had a little bit of gear, but I didn't have much. But the DPS check was like very real. Very, very real, even at that point. And then I remember parsing E8S later with more gear. And yeah, absolutely. If you're speeding or you're parsing, the boss is going to die, obviously, much before the enrage timer. But we were playing with like, people who were relatively new to jobs. I think I was still learning SAM at the time. I think I learned it around E8S time-ish. And like, we hit enrage with like people that were good at the game. They were on alt jobs, so they didn't really know what they were doing. But like, We hit Enrage. I think we might have only had like one death the whole pull or something, and it was just like, man, we're BIS for our classes. Even though we don't know how to play them, we're BIS, but like we still hit Enrage, and this is like something you would never see ever in World of Warcraft. That late in a tier. Obviously you would never see that in like, if you went and did like Ramu, even with a bunch of hooligans. But I think the fights are very well balanced, and I think that the DPS checks are very real in this game, and they're more DPS checks than they are gear checks. So
I think it just depends kind of on the content you're doing, and I mean in WoW especially, the gear treadmill is insane.
it's
And so like
awful.
the nature of like how stats work in that game, and I don't actually know much because I know they changed it. I don't know much about how it works now, but in the past, like with how powerful multiplicative stacking was on like the one stat your class needed. So like I
Your
used to
primary
play
stat.
I used to
Yeah.
play Affliction in Legion, and like haste, right?
Sure.
And so like the difference between having all this gear with haste and without was like huge. Um, and that meant that having this optimal setup just, or even just item level, just gave you such an enormous advantage. And it's not like Final Fantasy gear doesn't, like Final Fantasy gear makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the main difference is what gates your damage in WoW is primarily your gear, because the rotations are pretty simple. I have not played Mage in 6 years, but I'm pretty confident I could play Frost if you gave me about 3 minutes, right? And then you look at Final Fantasy, and you give someone who's never played the game best in slot, and then put him in front of a summoner and say, here you go, clear the tier, right? Like they're not going to do any damage. They don't know how the classes work. The classes
Yeah.
are more involved. Like they don't understand how anything works together. And so even though gear gates your damage a lot, the fact that you can clear the tier without primal weapons, without an optimal comp, in full crafted on day like 2, which is or 3 or whatever, which is what happened with Shiva, right? Like it's so much more just, are you good at the game?
Yeah,
right?
I agree. And I guess that's more what I was getting at, is like, because we were all new, right, to those jobs, and we didn't know how to play them. We didn't know, I don't even know if at the time I knew about like keeping buff up time on Samurai or aligning with.
Oh, you
like
you're
I
not
was
telling
bad.
me you were dropping. You're not telling me you were dropping Shifu and Jinfu.
Oh, I would
right?
never do that. Never. I'd never drop Higginbana ever. 100% uptime. Never over cap on my gauge. I was yeah. So to say the least, I was playing Samurai like I was playing Summoner. But it's cool that I like that the game caters more to, if you know how to play the game and you're good at playing the game, you can pretty much do whatever. So you not only have to like prog the fight and its mechanics, but you have to also optimize the fight simultaneously, or quote unquote optimize the fight simultaneously.
I mean, yeah, the content in this game, and when I say this, it's often misinterpreted, but there's very little content in the game that's really hard.
I agree.
When I say the word hard, I don't mean like isn't difficult or not, but like, like if you look at a game like WoW, well, I don't know if WoW's actually a great comparison for this. I'm trying to think of a good comparison.
Dark
Basically,
Souls.
like, yeah, kind of. I mean, the word that's in my mind is meta, right? Like, if you look at any game that has a meta, there's a demonstrable power difference between whatever is meta and isn't. And WoW has had this problem with balancing before. My heart goes out to anyone who plays Feral. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Poor Feral
Where are
Druids.
my sub rogues at since they nerfed us in Zool?
Yeah, poor sub rogues. But you know, you look at those games, or like MOBAs have metas all the time, like League and Dota,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's some like apparent advantage to doing this thing, and the content that you're doing is hard enough that the advantage is desirable, right?
Sure.
So like you're playing ranked in League and you really want to win, right? And you're playing against a good team. You're gonna, like, the pros are gonna pick the meta, right? Because it's whatever is best in that situation. It's the strongest pick, and they're not gonna pick whatever sucks, right? And then you compare that to Final Fantasy, and when I say there's nothing hard, what I mean is the word meta doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, people did UCOB with 8 tanks. They've cleared it with 7 people. They've done T with 1 tank and 1 healer, right? Like, you know, like, you look at stuff like this. You can go into Savage and clear it with 1 healer. You can do it with 5 physical ranged, like, right? And so that's kind of tying in with like the gear thing. Is the question with Final Fantasy, and part of what I really love about it is it's really just, are you good at it, right? Like, are you good at it? It's not, you know, have you passed this gear check, right? Have you done your Azurite dailies or whatever
Oh
the hell
God.
new Azurite is called? I don't know what it's called anymore.
Don't remind me.
You know, have you done your Torias tours or whatever, right? It's not that. It's just like, do you know what you're doing, right? And I feel like that is a lot better.
I agree.
Just in terms of design.
It's healthier. You don't feel like you're, oh, I didn't log in today. I'm losing player power. It's
Yeah.
like just constant anxiety of like not playing the game 24/7. So,
Yeah, playing WoW. I don't know why anyone would.
Yeah, who
do
would
that.
ever do that? I don't know.
Not.
So I have a couple more questions, and then we can open it up to some chat questions if anyone has any. But going back to, like, you know, World First and progression specifically, what do you think makes a good progression team? Whether that's in terms of mindset, characteristics, synergy, whatever you think makes the best progression raid team.
So what makes a team really good at Prog are a set of skills that most players don't have, or they just haven't trained. And it's what's the best way to describe it? I think it's a mixture of awareness, being able to really quickly adapt, and also, like, what's the word? I can't think of a good word for it, but just like not ending a pull.
Oh,
right?
Like keeping the fight going for the sake of seeing other mechanics, essentially.
Yeah, and so, like, it's really those 3 things that combine to make a team actually good at it. And so the reason I say that is because the really good teams at Prog are aware that what matters in Prog is how fast you kill it and nothing else. Right? Like, arses are a meme. You know, damage check's a meme. Like, all that matters is how fast you kill it. And what that means is the really good teams are very good at making the full use out of every pull they take, or as much as they can, right? And, you know, mistakes happen, of course, but, you know, if you watch like a really good team at Prog work, they're out here, you know, using all their self-mitigation. They're not hitting the boss. They're just using all of their chain raises. They're positioning themselves in a way that allows them to see mechanics. They are quickly documenting everything they see. They're communicating all of this to each other, right? And so, especially when you get to the majority of a fight that is not really that hard, they're cutting out all this unnecessary filler and deaths, right? They see something that they recognize and they just do it. And so the really good prog teams will get to that 1 or 2 wall mechanics very quickly. Every Final Fantasy fight basically functions by, here's your introductory filler that's not really that difficult. Here's your one mechanic that's really, harder and walls the fight, and you finish that mechanic and then you basically win.
Sure.
And most fights have 1 to 3 of those mechanics. E9S, it's tiles and towers, right? And everything else in the fight's like whatever.
Yeah.
And so they understand that's how the game works, and they're really good at getting through all the filler quickly. They're just aware of what's happening. They adapt very quickly. They quickly communicate. They notice this thing does proteans. They quickly raise the people, and they see it again, and they say proteans, right? And so on and so forth. And then on top of that, they're very adaptable and consistent, right? So they don't make those mistakes again, and then they get to the wall, the mechanics that wall them, and they adapt to solve them as quickly as possible, right?
Right.
And it sounds kind of silly. It makes it sound simple, but those skills are really hard. They go against a lot of ingrained like habits that players have, right? Stuff like my damage really matters. No, it doesn't. Stuff like dying is really bad. Like, who cares, right? Stuff like having to have like established exact positions and strats for everything. No. My favorite story from Promise Prog is that in Brambles in E9S, Arisa's group, who I ninth for, literally did not understand how Brambles worked. They just YOLO'd them every single time. Because there was no reason to figure it out.
Sure,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Like, if YOLOing worked, you just got through the mechanic and moved on.
Yeah.
And they literally they didn't create diagrams. They didn't create a strat. They literally said, "Oh, we have Brambles spread out," and then ran like chickens with their heads cut off. And if anybody died, they just raised them, and they just kept going. And like that mindset is very alien to a lot of players. But it's what makes you good at prog is being able to just adapt and quickly do stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. And so how do you practice that? Like, we've been doing a lot of, blind prog and stuff. But if, let's say you run out of fights to blind prog and quote practice this, like, how do you practice that besides just taking away what you can? Like, I guess going to the mindset that you were just setting forth, right? You would basically take away everything that you can away from a pull. Use the pull to its fullest. There's no like filler pulls essentially. Like you're always going into a pull with the ideology of gaining something from doing that pull, or learning something that you didn't know or didn't see or whatever. So how do you practice that when you start running out of fights, or if you don't even know where to start, I guess?
That, I think, is exactly why so many people aren't good at it. It's not because the skill is inherently really, really difficult. It's because you don't ever have a chance to practice it.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do you get good at it? You get good at it by doing the new tier when it comes out.
By messing up, essentially.
Right?
Learning from your mistakes, what went right, what went wrong.
Yeah, like you get good at it by learning from people who are already good at it, or just doing the new tier when it comes out, right? Or like old content. And yeah, there's a limited supply of that content. So what do? Well, you just wait until the next content in 5 months or a year. And you don't really have any other options.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly why so many people aren't good at it. Like that's why in in the balance, everybody says that Titan Shield sucks, even though it's like the most broken ability in the game, right? You know, that's why people say like red mages should only raise, even though like no, right? Or healers should only raise, right? That's a common one. Or you know, like there's all these opinions that are just they're just wrong, right? Um, and that's because those people aren't exposed to this situation. Everybody that does Savage is exposed to the situation of wanting to do more damage, right?
Yeah.
Everybody. You see, you haven't like most people have a meter, or they're just aware of how damage works and they want to do more damage, right? You know, everybody's aware of that, and so people assign value to that. But not everybody is aware of what prog is actually like in specifically in the blind prog scenario, right? And even though people experience prog, they don't actually do prog efficiently because there's not really incentive necessarily, right? Your incentive is clearing faster, but people just don't think about it, I guess. I don't know. Right? But if you've ever played in a group and progged in a group with good healers versus bad healers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you ever have, right? But a group with good healers is gonna prog like
A million
quadruple the
times
speed,
faster. Yeah.
right? And it's exactly because why? Because they're saving more pulls, they're reducing the amount of times you wipe, they're reducing the amount of times you head back to the, you know, right?
They're extending the fight time by being able to like adjust and adapt to like
Yep.
just shit hitting the fan essentially.
They're getting people
Yeah.
more practice at seeing more stuff in the fight. And that's the reason why Black Mage is very cringe for prog and you shouldn't play it. Because it doesn't have a raise.
Yeah.
And in prog, if you don't have a raise caster, I'm sorry, but you're griefing, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's exactly why. Because why? Because raise saves pulls. So
Race saves pulls, it gives you more experience in the fight, it lets you see further in the fight. It's just yeah. Oh, that's an interesting take. I'm going to for now open up the chat for some questions. I'll just keep asking you a couple that I still had left. But anyone that wants to ask Leah or me a couple questions, feel free to put them in, and we'll go through them as they come in. But I'll start with, what are your thoughts on having a ninth man and the importance of it and the relevance of it?
I think it depends on your group. It having a ninth or multiple ninths adds a very different dynamic. And I guess for anybody who isn't aware, just in case, like a ninth is like a person in your who isn't raiding, but is like helping your group, either documenting information or coming up with strats or communicating stuff. But I think it depends. I think if you're actually doing world prog, like you're aiming for like a spot in like the top 5 or whatever, I think they're borderline necessary. And the reason why is just efficiency.
Yeah.
If you're playing the game, you can't be doing these other things, right? You can't be going to look at what other strats are doing or the other groups are doing. You can't be creating strats. You don't have the mental capacity to be thinking about all these things while you're playing the game and doing these mechanics and still learning the fight. And so I think if you're really interested in progging as fast as possible in that blind prog scenario, I think they're basically necessary. If you're just progging anywhere else, who cares, right?
I agree. Yeah.
If you're a mid-core, who cares, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know. So that's kind of my take on it. They just offer so much in terms of efficiency, like time efficiency.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that I wouldn't even like consider having a ninth man unless it's exactly what you're saying, doing World Prog, trying to shoot for some kind of like top world first ranking. I mean, if it's something that like, you know, your random friend in your group wants to do just for fun because they don't like raiding or whatever, more power to you. I think that it's a good tool to have, but I don't think it's necessary at all for clearing a tier. Have a question from Woot Wookers. You think Summoner AoE will be stronger than what it is come Endwalker? Thoughts?
It depends what you're doing. I think multi-target, like in dungeon pulls, will be a bit stronger, or at least comparable. Like if you have like a billion things. However, 2-target is going to be worse. So, or we think it's going to be worse anyway. The reason why is the design philosophy they've decided to use, that I'm not a huge fan of, is here's the button you press in single target, and here's the button you press in AoE. And they like are literally the same button, except this one does single target potency, and this one does AoE. And so the AoE one's only efficient at 3 or more targets. If you have 2, you're just stuck there doing your single target rotation, and the amount of cleave that we have in our rotation's a lot less. So in Shadowbringers, we can dot things. We have, incidental cleave on our Eggy Assault, some of them, on our pet abilities, on our Phoenix combo. So a lot of that incidental damage is gone in Endwalker. So I think it'll be better in multi-target, worse in 2, I guess is my answer.
I feel like a lot of classes struggle in 2-target.
Yeah, Summoner was like the king of it, especially if you look at like fights like T, where Summoner is just like destroying every other job because of Living Liquid and Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser being 2-target the whole time. And it's going to be like remarkably worse in that fight in Endwalker because it's losing like a lot of what it abuses in a 2-target situation.
Interesting. Clovis says, what are your thoughts on Summoner potentially losing Resurrection in the future?
Only if Red Mage loses it too. And that sounds like a meme answer.
No,
I know
it makes sense. Like
I know that Clovis is a Red Mage player,
yeah.
but I know that sounds like a meme, but I actually do mean it. And here's why. I'll explain why. If they want Raze to be a healer only thing, fine, right? Fine. Take it away from Summoner and Red Mage. I don't agree with it, but like whatever. But if they take it away only from Summoner and they leave it with Red Mage, then like this job just doesn't exist. Like in optimized content, right? Like you can still play it, but Black Mage is always going to do more damage, and Red Mage is always going to be better at prog. So where the hell do you play Summoner, right?
Dungeons. You
In
get dungeons.
Pepe laugh. Except Black Mage is still probably going to be better because of AoE, right? So I think that if Summoner loses Raze, it loses like it basically would be stuck in this middle ground where it's not good at anything, right? Or I guess it's good at everything but not great at anything. Does that make sense? And so, the meta is balanced enough that you of course could still play it, but it wouldn't really be good at anything, right? It would be Bard.
Tadge.
Yeah. Which, I mean, by the way, Bard is still like
no, it's great,
bad, right? So
I think Bard is by far my favorite Fizz range. Like, it's not even close in terms of how it plays, and I was having such a blast playing Bard in UCOB. Oh my gosh.
I refuse to play Bard because I'm still salty that Archer turned into it, and we don't have a Ranger.
That's fair. I kind of felt that as well when I first started playing. I was like, I want a true bow and arrow class, but I like the playstyle of it at least. It feels really fun. I haven't tried to optimize it though, so maybe I'll hate it.
Yeah.
I had
Uh,
another summoner question for you. But did you have a thought you wanted to finish, or
oh no
I
no,
didn't want
go
to
for
cut
it.
you off? Oh, okay. What jobs do you think summoner will synergize well with in Endwalker?
I mean, they're kind of throwing everything on that minute, 2 minute, you know,
Yeah.
homogenization thing. Um, I I don't know that it specifically synergizes with anything. I mean, the fact that Omni Bolden exists means that it can be played with Red Mage now, and the fact that you can play like the double raise comp in Prague and not be griefing your Red Mage is actually pretty significant. Uh, so like that one's a pretty big deal, but it's not because it like actually like interacts with Red Mage in like an amazing way. It's just that they changed Embolden.
Yeah.
So, right? Um there's not really any job that it has specific synergy with in that sense. It helps healers because it has healing, but that's kind of true of like a lot of jobs in the game, right? Like those kinds of synergies don't really exist in the game as much anymore. Um, there's very few that really synergize in that way, like at all. I'm trying to think, and like the days of that happening, right? Of like having the double fizz ranged slash or piercing resistance down debuff, right? Of Heaven's Ward, and which was a real thing.
Before my
Uh,
time, yeah.
yeah, back when you didn't run a caster, um,
Did
like
they
that
still have
sort of
the
stuff.
like 1% damage buff?
Yeah,
Wow.
yes, that's how strong it was.
Wow. Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
so like that sort of stuff is just not really in the game anymore. Um, so it's kind of a weird non-answer, I guess, but
I feel like that's a fair answer. I mean, it's kind of homogenizing yet not homogenizing in the sense of what they're doing with the raid buffs, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing per se. Um, I guess at the end of the day, it's mainly just going to come down to what the potency numbers turn out to be.
yeah, I mean it also depends on like how much spell speed we have, because then we drift out of buffs, and I guess you could say that it synergizes. It's got a 30-second buff, so Samurai, I guess, because Samurai's burst is like 30 seconds long, so I guess, but
Samurai just exists in the state of bursting.
yeah, it's like bursting for like 25 seconds. I think it's like 20 to 25.
Oh man. Slow says, what was your favorite fight in verse as summoner?
Oh my God, Slow asked that question just because he knows what I'm gonna say.
Oh,
In verse, my favorite fight was E7.
double dot.
And it's because of ad phase. Ad phase was so
Yeah,
much fun. You would triple dot, and like
actually. Yeah, sorry.
I have like clips of me doing that phase, kind of saved, and it's really fun to just watch because it's like so busy and you're tab targeting constantly, and you're having to like manage your demi movement around these AoEs that are appearing, but also staying with your group, and it was really fun. And then Bird NATO at the end is like really fun to manage movement around too. But outside of like being specifically summoner, E7 sucked.
Yeah, I remember playing double Sam on E7 with Saren, and he was like teaching me how to triple dot the ads. My brain was just like exploding because I was trying to learn Sam in the first place, and then there was this
Yeah.
like curveball in there. It's just like this.
It's hard. I should show you some of the clips of the summoner
Sure.
ad sometime.
Yeah, send them to me.
But yeah.
Avatar says, with the tooltips being released, what do you think a World Prog comp will look like?
It's completely dependent on what balancing ends up being on release. Um, because things are never finalized in the media tour, and there could always be a situation like Gate where Red Mage and Summoner were so bad that a lot of groups ran Black Mage, especially for Titan. That said, my guess is that Reaper is going to be insanely busted because of Arcane Crest and their mobility and how easy it is for them to like. It seems from what I've seen of their rotation that it's not very punishing and they can save up gauge, right?
And it's on
Um,
30-second cooldown, Arcane
yeah,
Crest.
and
It's
Arcane
ridiculous.
Crest is just this huge AoE heal, like that's easy to activate on a 30-second CD. So for like the melee DPS Reaper, Fizz ranged, Bard or Dancer are both probably good. Caster, Red Mage seems nuts. Embolden hits everything, and they get Magic Barrier, which is like an AoE defensive, and they still have Vercure, and they still have Raise and Dual Cast, and they also got like quality of life changes with mana gauges, so it just seems really good. The last DPS slot is either a Summoner for the second race, or and I would guess a Summoner because having 3 ranged is really good in Prog. It could be a Black Mage for some groups. Um, it could be a Dragoon, a Ninja. Can't really say. It really depends on what numbers end up being. But my guess for the DPS would be like Reaper, Dancer, or Bard, and then Red Mage Summoner. And then for tanks and healers, that depends. I think Scholar is just nuts. I think Scholar is just really good in Prog. Um, Scholar White Mage, I think is just very good. And in tank wise, I think Paladin and Dark Knight are the best of the bunch. Paladin because it's getting like the new Sheltron seems good. Clemency is just insanely powerful. Um, Even though Dark Knight is being memed on, like TBN is crazy good. Um, Even Oblation doesn't seem bad. Um,
Is that TVN at home
yeah,
ablation?
Oblation's like the TBN at home,
Okay.
but like it seems it like seems good actually though. Like people meme
Sure,
on it, but
yeah.
like I think it's good. Um, I think that Warrior might be good, but what the reason why Dark Knight and Paladin are so good is because they can influence the survivability of your other party members. And as a tank, what really matters, right? Like none of the tanks are that much better at staying alive than any of the others, with the exception of Warrior, with like spamming healing. Um, and so what really matters is how well can you keep your healers and casters alive, really, because they're the ones that are going to raise and keep your pull going. And Paladin and Dark Knight are the 2 tanks that can do that. Um, and then kind of on that line, like White Mage just does the most healing output. You said they're spamming Cure 3, right? I don't think Astro's going to compete with that. Also like the new like Lily Totem or whatever. And Scholar is just good. Like I know again Scholar's being memed on like haha sprint button, but like Scholar is just good. Like it outputs so much shielding. It's very safe if you're using your ether flow for actual healing, right? It just has an insane output and mitigation. It's very consistent. It's not that hard to play, like relatively, right? Even though like I don't think it's fun to play, its power level is insanely high. Like it's
Right.
very strong. Um, so
Yeah, what do you actually think about the speed movement speed thing?
I think it's good. I mean,
I agree. I'm interested to see how it plays out. I was talking to Apollo like when we did our Q&A, and I'm super interested to see how it played out, because in WoW, like any kind of movement increase that you would get was like bring that class, bring Druid, Stampeding Roar.
Impeding Roar,
Yeah,
yeah.
like that was such a huge ability, and I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out in Prog and
I
speeds.
I don't know how much it's gonna matter in Prog.
Hmm.
Outside of helping people like adjust faster. But in speeds, I can see that ability being very strong, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine you're, giving it to your melee and they're getting in and out for an extra GCD, like with this movement speed, right? Like, or your casters are getting to slide, well, slide casting, omega lol. But right, like your black mage is getting to slide cast faster with this movement speed, right? Or like,
Yeah.
your healers are getting, well, no one even needs to slide cast anymore, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Like,
The first thing I think of is like a chariot. Like
yeah, like
getting in and out of a
chariot.
chariot, it's like, oh, that GC is really tight. Like if I had just a little something here. Is it the same speed as sprint, or is it?
I don't know. I think it is the same as sprint.
Oh,
I think.
I don't know. I guess I'll just have to see how it plays out, because that's another thing too, right? You could just save a sprint for whatever, but I guess if they were back to back reading or whatever, it would matter. But
Apparently
it is
it
the
is
same as
just
sprint.
sprint.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't see it earlier, but Flo asked about Astrodyne.
Oh yeah, I missed that too.
In Prague, like, who cares? Button doesn't really do anything in Prague. Like,
What is Astrodyne?
so
For those
Astrodyne
curious.
is your new seal spender, and it has like extra effects based on how many seals you have, and it basically just gives you mana regen for 1 seal, a haste buff for 2 seals, and then a damage buff for 3 seals. And so like, in Prague you just hit it for mana regen, right? Like, who cares? Doesn't really matter. Oh, you were talking about, okay, never mind.
Macrocosmos, the big.
Macro
That's a whole
Cosmos.
nother story.
Macrocosmos is cool. It is a cool spell. I don't think they've made a spell that unique in a long time. As for anybody who doesn't know, Macrocosmos, like, it does like damage to an enemy, and then it gives everybody in your team a buff. And what that buff does is it stores damage you take over the duration, and then you heal, like, I think it's 50% of that damage back at the end. And so, like, if you take 30,000 damage, at the end you heal 15,000. I think that ability is very strong. I think the fact that it has a 2-minute cooldown means it's not really that strong in Prog. Right? Like, it's got like it has a 2-minute cooldown. You're not going to be using it very much. It's a very cool effect. It gives you a lot of healing, especially in like tank busters, right? If you have like huge hitting tank busters. But it doesn't happen often enough, right? It's not like Essential Dignity where like that button is just bailing people out left and right, I think the cooldown of it just makes it not as strong in Prog. And I could be wrong, it could be insane. But I don't see it, like, I wouldn't imagine that you take Astro for Macrocosmos, right? Like, I don't think it's that strong.
Okay, that's, yeah. So what would you take Scholar and White Mage for, as opposed to like what are the main things you see? I know we're talking about healers now, but like I'm genuinely curious, like what makes you want to bring a scholar and a white mage? Besides their just
Uh,
throughput, I guess. I don't.
White mage because it's throughput, and Sage. I'm not Sage. Astro could have a lot more healing than it does now. Maybe, I don't know. But white mage just sits there spamming like super high potency heals constantly, right? And nothing really competes with it. And in Prog, that matters a lot,
Yeah.
right? Just keeping your group alive and just spam healing damage it's a really big deal. I think it's going to be better at that than Astro, so I think it's going to be better than Astro for Prog. And if you look at Prog in Shadowbringers, like it traditionally most groups did run White Mage Scholar. Some groups ran Astro, but the fact that you have to learn a fight on Astro, know the timelines for where you put a star down, right? When is it good to use these abilities, right? Like it requires more planning, and you have to know the fight faster. And White Mage is just easier. It does more with less work.
It's kind of
in Prog, specifically
yeah,
in Prog.
Yeah, sure, yeah. That's kind of what I'm worried about with like playing Samurai in Prog too. Is like losing out a lot of potential, I should say, for the sake of Prog, like not staying a mechanic, like not greeting something that we're struggling with, and then it being, towards the end of a fight, so I just continue to not greet it because we know the DPS check isn't tight. Like I'm just kind of concerned with that, but
yeah, I mean lower execution jobs are often better.
Yeah.
And to touch on Scholar, I just think Scholar's better than Sage at, again, in Prog. Don't hate me, right? I just think, and I haven't studied Sage that closely, so I could be wrong, but Sage just doesn't seem that strong in comparison to Scholar in terms of like the mitigation and burst healing and right. Like if you compare like a recitation indom on a soil with a spread adlo, like how does Sage compete with that, right? Like I don't think it does. You know what I mean? Like
shields
I just
are
don't,
huge.
right? I just don't think it competes with it. And I think like if you're looking for that mitigation, I think Scholar's just better. But who knows? Numbers could always change. Things can always change. And I'm also, I should mention, I'm also assuming that you're gonna want a shield and a regen healer.
It's a good point, actually.
I mean, who knows? Maybe like Scholar and Sage is really good. Like maybe I would expect you need at least one shield healer, especially for week 1.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? And it's not that I think Sage is bad. I actually think Sage might be better than Scholar in optimization. I don't know. It just depends. But because I think Sage has a lot more lossless healing than Scholar does. Stuff like their Adlo equivalent. If it breaks, it gives you a GCD. But or whatever it is. But like it's just not the same output, I guess. And in Prog, you don't really care about your damage. So also, I don't, and I admit I don't really know exactly how Sage works. So like some of the stuff I'm saying could be wrong, but based off of like what I know about it.
I also feel like, at least in WoW, I haven't actually like World Progged in Final, so I don't know, but at least in WoW, shield healers are very strong. And like Scholar is the one healer in this game that I feel like does shields obviously very well. And being able to just mitigate damage rather than having to replace the health has always been an advantage in WoW. It's why Discipline Priests have been brought like every single tier. Obviously their damage is also really high, but like just being able to mitigate damage in general is such a huge advantage. But we do have another question from Dav. All those new hardcore raiders coming from WoW and other games, do you think we'll maybe see teams coming from WoW on World First Prog? So we actually did talk about this a little bit, but feel free to answer his question.
Just to summarize, probably. We can't know for sure, but they sounded like they were going to, and if they do, then cool. We talked earlier kind of about like opinions on that and streaming and that being good or bad. And I don't want to like say that conversation again because it took a while. But
no, you're fine. It's okay. But yeah, basically, I think you can definitely expect some WoW teams to be coming. To at least take a stab at it for fun, because they're not gonna have content until like February of next year anyway. So
yeah, and if you like watch some of their streams and stuff, they seem like they really enjoy it. I don't know if they're gonna world first prog, but I would expect a lot of them to prog.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
It just kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any questions left for you. I don't know if anyone else has any questions left in the chat, so I'll give it a couple of minutes. But did you have any questions for me? Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about? Floor is open to whatever.
What's Jojo up to?
He's sleeping.
He
was at daycare today, and it was his grooming day.
Oh no.
So we got what I like to call his butt mullet trimmed.
Oh no.
Because his little corgi butt gets a little crazy sometimes. But yeah, he's been knocked out. I normally will send him to daycare like once or twice a week to just socialize with other dogs and let him get some energy out. And when he comes home, he is he is very tired. He just, I let him in and he just goes straight under the bed, and then that's it. He's just knocked out for hours.
It's so cute.
He's great.
I love that dog.
I love him. He's definitely been the most interesting dog that I've ever had. Prior to him, I had a boxer for 15 years. She was a show dog that our friends had and gave to us when she was really young. She was like pretty trained when we got her, and she was very like obedient and really sweet and everything. But like Jojo has like a huge personality, which I've never experienced in a dog before. And I guess when I say personality, in the sense of he knows what you're telling him, but he chooses whether or not he wants to listen to you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've had a dog like that before too. It's just like, okay.
It is much different than what I'm used to. Yeah, it's like I know you know your name. Like I'm calling you, like I can see you. It's funny because he'll look at you out of the corner of his eye, but he won't turn his head. It's like, I know you hear me. Like I can see your big old ears like kind of looking at me. So yeah, he's doing great. He's great as always, and he's just tired. But
thank you for the Jojo update. It really means a lot.
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to always give Jojo updates. I have like, I just sorted my my phone pictures 2 days ago actually, and put all of his pictures in the album. It's a lot. It's too many. I have a problem.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think there's any more questions, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I say this every single stream. I feel like I had a blast doing this. You were great to talk to. I know we didn't really know each other too much outside of like just knowing of each other prior to this, so it was really good to sit down and get to know you and talk about something that you're really passionate about, and it shows when you talk about it. It's really exciting to see and gives me some serotonin to look forward to. So
Well, thank you for having me. It was super fun.
yeah, absolutely. Anytime. But yeah, so for anyone who was late or wants to catch it later, I will upload this to YouTube, my YouTube channel, at some point when I get to go through and timestamp everything. But yeah, thanks for everyone that came out and hung out. Thanks for everyone who asked questions and participated in the little chat segment. And again, thank you so much, Leah. It really means a lot to me that you were willing to take time out of your day and hang out, and hope that we can talk more in the future.
Yeah, of course. You know where to find me.
For sure, for sure.
Bug me anytime.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys. Y'all have a good night, and we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.